This is the Comics Alternative, on location at Valhalla Games and Comics in Plano, Texas. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative, on location at Valhalla Games and Comics. They're located at 3100 Independence Parkway. For those of you playing at home, that's the corner of Parker and Independence in Plano, Texas. They're great guys here. They know their comics. They know their games. They know almost anything when it comes to pop culture consumption. So it's a great place to get your material, comics and otherwise. That's Valhalla Games and Comics in Plano, Texas. And as always, thanks to the fine folks at Valhalla for allowing me to come in and talk with you guys that I'm sitting around a table here with for the On Location show. Now, we have a good crowd here, and it's good. It's appropriate, and we can talk about why I hope that this is appropriate in a moment. But I just want to go around and introduce folks. Some are regular, some are first time. So we have Craig. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, and you're not at, everybody's always invited. Well, for the most part, I guess. But I'm surprised. At first, I was surprised that you're here because the past several years you've been going to San Diego.
Yes, unfortunately, I couldn't get tickets for this year's San Diego Comic-Con, so I'm jealous of everybody who is there right now.
Yeah, so the podcast is a consolation prize.
Yes, I guess you could put it that way, but I'm always happy to be here. So
yeah. So, for instance, if this were The Price is Right, we're not the brand new car, but we're the, I don't know what, a new washing machine maybe? If that, maybe a toaster oven.
That's still pretty good, depending on if you have a really bad washing machine.
Okay. And the washing machine comment is from Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing well.
Yes.
Glad to have you back here. And then, beside Matt, of course, this is an audio podcast, so my comments about beside any kind of spatial reference means nothing. Holy balls! It's Jay Loving. Jay, this is. You're not new to the podcast, but this is the first time that you're here at Valhalla for an on-location show.
Yes, first time I've made it. I've been listening about a year to the podcast.
Yeah, and we know you've been listening because you have been one of the most diligent retweeters and commenters. And, that really does go a long way. We appreciate that.
Well, I try to do, I've got a good number of friends that are in comics, and I try to get them interested in various things. And a lot of them don't listen to this podcast, so I keep tweeting them so that they'll see it over and over again, so maybe they'll listen in.
Yeah, so, force them to listen to the Comics Alternative, because, we're all about coerciveness.
I agree. I support coerciveness.
Yes. Glad you could make it. Someone else who tends to retweet a lot of our comments that we tweet out is also here, and that's Tristan. How are you doing, Tristan?
Hi there. I'm doing fine, I guess. Okay. Passable.
Yeah. Passable.
Yeah, passable.
Now, it being the summer, you're able to be here because are you taking summer courses at UNT?
I am taking one, and it's geology or geography. It's not interesting.
He's been doing so much
you don't
work
even know whether it's geography or geology.
No, it is. I just thought about it.
Tell that he's
geography.
really paying attention in class.
They do mention rocks, but it's not only about rocks, so it is geography.
Okay, so it's not like a rock. If they talk about a rock in geography, it's Gibraltar, let's say.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
So if it has geo in it, it's just all the same.
And then next to him is a first-time guest on the Comics Alternative on Location, Kelly.
Hello.
Welcome, Kelly. And how did you hear about the on-location shows we do for the podcast?
I honestly just saw a notification on Facebook. One of my friends clicked interested in the event. So I was like, oh, shoot, I have today off. That sounds fun. I like comics. the end.
Well, great. Glad
I
to.
guess I wasn't expecting to get roped in,
But why
here I am.
not? Why not? See,
All about the coercion.
yes, all about the coercion, like I said. So welcome, and we have a good size crowd here, and we're all fitting around 4 microphones. Now, to get back to something I said a moment ago, I said that it's rather appropriate that we have a really sizable crowd here today. I'm glad because this is going to be the last on-location episode at Valhalla Games and Comics that I'll be doing for a while. And, as I messaged all of you earlier in the week on Facebook, I'm going to be moving, in fact, this coming weekend to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I won't be back here for I don't know when. So I don't know how long. It's because of family obligations. So it may be months and months and months and months and months before I'm able to come back here and do an on-location show. So I'm glad that you guys were able to come out and be a part of this recording. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
And in fact, today I was looking through some of our previous on-location episodes at this location, whether it was Valhalla or Collected or Lone Star. And our very first on-location episode was in March of, was it 2013, I think it was? Yes, I think, March of 2013. And it was when it was Lone Star. And on that show, I think that Rick, who was the old manager when this place was Lone Star, and then I think the first few months when it was Collected, he said a few words, but for all practical purposes, it was just a dialogue between me and Shay Henham. Now, Shay is a friend of ours, a friend of mine, and he's also one of my co-hosts on the Comics Alternative on the Manga Show. So I sent him a couple of emails to tell him, you really should be here for this, maybe for a long time, final episode at Valhalla, because he was here for the first on-location show, and it would be kind of a nice little bookend. But he hasn't shown, so thank you very much, Shay. I appreciate that.
I'm sure he's very busy with whatever he's doing.
Well, working, writing,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sleeping.
So I guess I should give him the benefit of the doubt. But anyway, so it was that long ago that we were started to do the on-location shows. And we haven't done one every month since then, but most months we have. I had mentioned to you guys before we turned on the mic, there were occasions when I had to be out of town again because of family situation for several months, and so I may not have been here. And then there were 1 or 2 occasions, I think, and one last summer, if I remember correctly, where we had to cancel it because of something in store that was problematic. I know last summer the air conditioning was out.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And not only did not many people show because of that, but the management said, no, you don't want to be here. Go home.
It was misery.
It was probably a good call.
Yes. That was some miserable days.
Yes.
I do have a question, though.
Sure.
How many episodes have you done here had 4 men with shaved heads sitting here at the table?
That's right, yeah.
We didn't do this on purpose.
I'm just curious. I mean, it's like...
Wow, yeah. Now, we've had at least 3. I can't remember if we've had an on-location show with 4 of us.
Yeah.
So, in fact, we'll have to ask one of the guys, Nick or Freddie, to take our. In fact, if someone could get them, we need photos of this episode, so they can take a photo and then email it to me, and they can make a photo of the 4 shaved heads.
Yeah. Podcast of the shaved heads. That'll be the subtitle.
Well, I'm sorry. I
The picture will go up for show notes.
Sure.
That's okay. So, what we're going to do for this on-location episode is basically, kind of a free-for-all. Open topic, whatever you guys want to talk about when it comes to comics. Now, I open the show by setting a context and also taking a very brief trip down memory lane. But in terms of comics this summer, what's interesting you? What do you find fascinating? What are you reading?
Okay, I'll
You want
start.
to go first?
What am I reading? I'm reading all of Guggenheim restarted all of the X-Men with X-Men Gold and Blue, and I'm really happy now that the X-Men are no longer whining about the fact that they're going extinct. They're just fighting bad guys. And going back to maybe you guys will complain that it's going back to the old days, the X-Men, but I'm really, really happy about all of that. I got, you have, well, she used to be Shadowcat, but she's Kitty Pryde now. She's leading the X-Men with the classics of like Colossus, and you have Rachel Gray back in there, and they're fighting off all the giant robots that hate them, and now they got a mutant-hating serial killer inside the mansion trying to kill them all off. It's been a lot of very exciting episodes, so I've been really enjoying that one. X-Men Blue has been taking the time-transplanted mutants of the original X-Men team, and they've been doing some fun adventures with them as well. And it's actually found the ultimate universe is Wolverine and convinced him to join them. So that's been fun watching the X-Men be back into the superhero business again, so, instead of just whatever they were for the past several years.
Having like wars. With
the
everybody?
Inhumans and with everyone, with the Avengers and
right.
Now, how much of this change in the X-Men do you think has been brought about because of the Marvel Universe, the cinematic, and especially the television with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I think you could say at least 90% of it has to be with Disney's fight over Fox rights over the mutant universe, especially for movie rights and stuff like that.
That's what I was going to ask you. Sorry. That's what I was going to ask you. I haven't kept up with the X-Men super well over the past couple of years, but I know that Ike Perlmutter, the CEO of Marvel, the whole company, who is allegedly very difficult to deal with, but doesn't give interviews, he doesn't anything, he's just reclusive. He's been cited as the reason that the X-Men and such have been given a lower push in the comics recently, because he wants to push the MCU more. Is that what's been happening to the X-Men? They've just been going extinct?
Yeah, so to give you a catch up on stuff, is the X-Men for the last several years until fairly recently, the mutant race has been going extinct for various reasons. Lately, it was because when the Inhumans set off their big bomb that made all of the world into Inhumans, that was also killing all of the mutants. And so that's why they went to war with the Inhumans, because they could figure out they could stop the Inhuman gas and then stop killing the mutants. But they'd have to go to war with the Inhumans, because that's how they become Inhumans.
Right. Okay.
And so after all of that got settled, and a lot of that is true too, is Marvel did not want any new X-Men characters that came out of the comic books were automatically into the Fox movie rights.
Right.
And so that's why they really stopped making any new mutant characters.
Right.
Because they were trying to force Fox to give them back the rights to the X-Men.
They're trying to starve them, effectively.
Yes,
Okay.
Because they couldn't make any new characters. So, when Hugh Jackman quit as Wolverine, they were saying, well, he can't have Wolverine anymore because there's no more X-Men characters.
Right. Okay.
And so there's a lot of just fighting between Fox and Disney over all of this.
Okay.
But it looks like either they finally got just saner heads involved, or maybe they just said, what the heck with it, we're just going to make exciting X-Men comics and go from there.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully that's the case. Or maybe finally Fox and Disney have finally reached at least an agreement. I doubt they'll ever share universes like Spider-Man and like Sony Spider-Man and the MCU, but
probably not. No.
Maybe at least they can talk to each other now.
And it would kind of be a mess to try and just drag the whole of the Fox CU, I guess, into the MCU, because that's adding 200 characters into it.
Yeah, it'd just be kind of crazy. Then you would have to explain how all these mutants just popped up and how they're different from just superheroes and all of that type stuff. So I've always been kind of the thing that maybe Fox should just keep the X-Men, because they can make a whole universe just with the X-Men.
Right.
And then the MCU can just keep the Avengers and all of the, the superheroes that we know and love. And they don't really have to meet, and you don't have to explain why all of a sudden, poof, there's Wolverine here and a guy that can shoot laser blasts out of his eyeballs, and yet no one has seen them until just then.
Right.
And then explain adamantium and all of that type stuff. But still, maybe there's still hope for that. But that's been really good. Just one that just recently finished here in the last couple of months is The Unworthy Thor. If you haven't read that yet, that's amazing. If you haven't kept up with the recent Thor comic books, Jane Foster now wields the hammer Mjolnir and is Thor. So what happened to our Thor? Well, he got really depressed that the hammer no longer likes him and just became an alcoholic and goes around picking fights with people. Well, then he finds out that the Ultimate Universe's hammer has appeared in the Marvel Universe. And he's like, well, maybe I can go weld that and become Thor again. And so the whole comic is him going to go find that hammer. And it's absolutely amazing. And who has the hammer right now? And it's really, really good. And the consequences that show that up in the new Thor comics.
Cool.
I don't want to take up all the time, so I can just go on forever.
Right.
Well, the way that they weave their stories in the Marvel universe, you've just scratched the surface.
Oh yeah. This is
much.
just very the surface type stuff. But it's got some cool stuff in it, like the new Wolverine, Laura Kinney. She's off with the Guardians of the Galaxies now, and if you're a fan of the Brood from the old X-Men stuff, the Brood have shown back up. So I'm excited about that. But who doesn't love space aliens? Like to eat people.
I mean, sure, why not?
I can take the segue from there, I guess, off of the because you mentioned the Terrigen Mist and you mentioned Odin's son losing the title of Thor. So I haven't read anything new recently because, well, I guess is Justice League versus Suicide Squad new?
Yeah, that was just finished up here in the last 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh,
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Maybe we'll come back to that because I don't want to talk about it right now. But
That's a fun book too.
I finally decided to go back and read the Kamala Khan run as Ms. Marvel because I have heard nothing but lavish praise heaped upon it. This is amazing. This is like the freshest thing ever. And I'm a very cynical person, and I didn't believe it, and so I decided to read it. And she is my new favorite superhero.
Yeah, I love her.
Absolutely.
She's
I love
amazing.
her so much. The
Yeah.
fact that every time she runs into a superhero, she just starts fangirling like crazy. She writes fan fiction of them. It's fantastic.
She's awesome. Yeah, I love her too. Yeah.
And I guess it helps that I really already liked Carol Danvers. She's pretty neat. But I see that Matt has something right here that is making me think of the other thing I've been reading a whole lot recently, which is the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Yeah.
Because that is also old, but also fantastic and amazing. And oh, hey, there's Miss Marvel as well.
She's going to get her own...
And what Tristan's referring to is that, Matt has a Squirrel Girl statue.
That's right. I got the Kotobukiya, I can't say the name right.
Kotobukaya.
Kotobukai Bishojo statue of Squirrel Girl.
Looks great.
And it's cute. She's got a little tippy toe in there that she holds on her hand.
It is adorable.
Yeah,
It is adorable.
although the little bit of plastic that Tippy Toe sits on her hand, whenever Tippy Toe's not there, it looks like she just has some weird
I know.
cylindrical
If you
tumor
ignore
on her
the
wrist.
human growth on her hand.
The thing just burrowing into her wrist.
Yeah,
That's
so keep
right.
so keep Tippy Toe there.
Yeah, that's right.
But I've just been, other than, I guess, Justice League versus Suicide Squad, it's okay. I don't know what I was expecting because I just kind of read it out of random, but it is based on the film Suicide Squad team,
Yeah.
which is a bad movie, but is fun to laugh at,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
with. I watched it with a friend of mine, and the comic is okay. It's got Amanda Waller in it, and she's always kind of scary, and it involves the I guess really far in the past version of the Suicide Squad coming back in a form, and a lot of weird stuff happens. An old character from Superman's past comes back. That's kind of neat, and it is interesting to see I guess there is a hypothetical presented at one point. I'm going to try really hard to word this with no spoilers, but it's it's very similar to Injustice in a way. I'm just going to leave it at that, I guess, because I can't think of a good way to describe it without spoilers.
Suicide Squad versus Justice League was actually pretty interesting, too, because you were trying to think, how could Suicide Squad even compete with the Justice League when you have Superman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Batman? They find more interesting ways to fight those guys.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That just made that book a lot of fun. It's like, well, how are they going to take care of it next week? It's it was so that made that book a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool fight scenes in that one, and a lot of the cool villains from DC's past shows up, and that makes it a lot of cool too.
What about the other three people?
Well, I got a copy of a graphic novel that Nick actually spurred me onto about
And Nick is someone who joins
at-
us occasionally, but he can't today because he's manning the
Pretending
cash
to
register.
work.
He's pretending to work at the moment, yeah. It's called The Sound of the World by Heart by Gaikoma Belaveke? I don't know how to say it.
So this is a translation of a European album?
Yeah, it's written and illustrated by him. And it's actually about a photojournalist named Sam who goes to New York City and spends 60 days, or he tries to spend 60 days without actually speaking to anybody at all. So he communicates by text or writing notes and stuff like that. And he walks around the city with headphones, so people won't talk to him or stuff like that. And it does some interesting things with the dialogue boxes in the implementing it into the story. That's really interesting, and it's actually freaking fantastic as far as the landscaping and the architecture, the way that it's drawn. It's very, very beautiful, and I really enjoyed the book. I think people should check it out.
Does it tell you why he doesn't want to talk to anybody?
Yes, it does, but that's spoilers.
And this is a Lion Forge book, part of the Magnetic Press imprint.
Sure. If anyone wants to check it out. No?
And it's interesting because it wasn't until the past, I don't know, maybe 3 months or so that I really started to notice Lion Forge. And I guess because I've started to see their quite substantive section in the previews catalog. Now, I remember seeing things from Magnetic Press, but I don't know if Magnetic Press has always been a part of Lion Forge, or if they were acquired by Lion Forge. I mean, I don't know, and I haven't looked it up, right? I haven't dug around to find out the history of this. But there's several imprints with Lion Forge, at least as I can tell from the previews catalog. Another thing about Lion Forge that has come to my attention is my co-host for the monthly Eurocomic series, Edward Govan, had suggested that we may want to look at some Lion Forge books, which means they're translations from European or at least non-English originals. And he knows someone, he has a contact at Lion Forge, and suggested that we contact that person to get on their mailing list. But that's about the extent of what I know of Lion Forge. But I keep hearing more and more about them. So are you guys, the rest of you, familiar with Lion Forge books? Either individual series or single graphic novels like this?
I started reading the Catalyst Prime books.
Okay.
They began with a free comic book day. Was their sort of overall book. It was written by Christopher Priest, as a matter of fact, and it's setting up a new superhero, and I'm releasing titles gradually. I think Noble was the first one, and there was in the second one called Excel, and I think they're supposed to have 7 titles out by the end of the year. And I'm finding it interesting. It's really well written.
So this is part of a universe of theirs. And is it like superhero or a variation of that?
Variation. Sort of, in some ways it kind of deconstructs superheroes, kind of like similar way to Watchmen did and No Hero and Black Summer, Warren Ellis wrote. It's superheroes, but it's looking at asking some of the harder questions about it.
Well, maybe that's something we could discuss on the regular weekly Comics Alternative show, because, we don't discuss DC and Marvel universes. If you consider that the mainstream, most people do. But other kinds of superheroes and superhero twists or superhero parodies or superhero commentaries, we have discussed. So maybe I'll have to check that out.
Well, they've got the book that came out on Free Comic Book Day was called The Event, and it describes this event that happens. It sort of sets up the whole universe. And they've got 3 titles out now: Noble, Excel, and Superb, I think, just came out. So there's only a couple or 3 issues out for each of those titles. So there's not a lot yet, but it's growing. And but I can recommend it. I'm enjoying it.
Okay. Put that on my ever-increasing and debilitating to-read list.
Have the time.
Yeah.
One of my managers at the restaurant that I work at is quite upset that I have still not read Kingdom Come. I mentioned that to him, but like you said, it's on the list. It's just a long list.
It'll just keep getting bigger, I'm sure.
That's right.
At least mine keeps getting bigger all the time.
Well, they keep coming out with really small, 5-shot, series. So, add that on top of the ongoing Marvel or DC stuff, and
But Kingdom Come, though, that's one of those. I don't know if I'd call it comics canon, but it's one of those that, in terms of superhero titles, is one that you hear all the time, and so it's like at some point you're going to have to read it.
Oh yeah,
if you consider yourself, interested in comics.
It's like the Crisis series, I guess, or House of M or Civil War. It's one of the big ones.
Yeah. It's just finding the time to.
Oh yeah,
that's always the trick.
Has anyone here read Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner's run on Power Girl? Because I've heard it's good, but
No, unfortunately, I haven't.
all right.
That's from 7 years ago or so?
Yeah.
A while.
Mm-hmm. No, unfortunately, I haven't read that one. I've heard good things about it, but I couldn't really say anything for myself.
They're generally pretty good. I read their Starfire run recently, and when she's living in Florida.
That one's pretty good.
Key West, Florida, and it is good. It's a bit weird.
Amanda Conner writes some really good stuff. I've enjoyed her work. Even her run on Harley Quinn has been really pretty good.
Also heard that's fantastic, and also on the list eventually.
The titles escapes me. They also did a series for Aftershock.
Zero Girl.
Zero Girl. Yes.
Was it Zero Girl? Is that the title of it?
Yeah. I couldn't remember for a moment.
Yeah. And in fact, we did an Aftershock publisher spotlight with their first round of series, and so we looked at the first 1 or 2 issues of all of the new series at that time. And so I guess it was right when they started, so it was something like, I don't know, maybe 5 series that they had going on when they first started those first few months. And has that ended?
Yeah,
Zero
it was
Girl?
a 6-issue.
Okay, because I didn't keep up with it. I read the first, I think, 3 issues and then kind of let it go. Not because I didn't like it, I just too much to read. That was good, though.
It was good.
Well, what about Aftershock? Aftershock is, about a year and a half ago? One of those publishers that kind of came in with a splash, and they've been pretty good at, I don't know if they've maintained their same level of awareness, and maybe they have, maybe they've increased in attention, but they're fairly consistent in terms of the new series that they come out with. Like at least every other month, I notice a new #1 issue from them.
Yeah, they they're kind of taking the same model as Image. Image constantly puts out new #1s. And Aftershock can't put out the volume that Image does, but they at least try to find something new consistently. And some of it's been pretty cool, and others have been not as cool.
Did Aftershock do the Puppet Master series, the new one?
I can't remember.
I don't think so.
No,
I can't remember. That's a good question. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
But they did. What was the one that I was trying to remember? The one that I read recently on them, and I can't think for the life of me now.
You sure it's not in that?
An Aftershock comic?
Yeah. I know that just
one title that's been getting a lot of exposure is Animosity. Marguerite Bennett.
that was it. Yeah, Animosity's off on. So the animals all of a sudden not only gain awareness, but they can talk, and they are pissed at humans. And all of them are looking just to either kill their owners or just kill all the humans they can, and except for this one dog, who turned around and looked at its child or its person and said, "I love you," and is now protecting that little girl from all the craziness that's going on. It's a fantastic book. And so it's been her adventures as she's going through this world. It's been, all of a sudden deer are now hunting the hunters, and it's a pretty brutal world, but it's got some really cool adventure stories. As she picks up friends along the way, and they all try to help and protect her. It's got some really cool stories on that, and and also tells some pretty sad stories on how people treat their pets. It's not a feel-good book, but it has some good moments in it. But so I do recommend that one. But I warn you, it's pretty brutal. There's lots of really brutal death scenes in that one.
Oh, goody.
They seem to be doing a lot of good titles. Another one that's out is Alters.
Is that the one with the
transgender superhero?
Yeah, I read the first one on that one and liked it a lot. That where he's a transgendered superhero, but yet hasn't come out to his family yet. So it's at least the first issue on that one was pretty interesting. I haven't had a chance to read any of the others yet.
They've completed the first arc. I think they're sort of on hiatus right now, but I can recommend that.
Is American Monster still going on, or did that end?
I don't know that one.
I don't know if it. I'm not sure it's been officially said one way or the other. I haven't seen any new issues in a long time.
Yeah, and that's why I asked. And that was the Brian Azzarello title. And I don't remember, and I can't remember who the artist is on that, but I don't remember seeing anything for a long time about that.
Indefinite hiatus, I guess. They don't want to use the word canceled, but nothing coming out. Kind of like that.
I wonder if Moonshine is sapping his energies, his crime energies. Because, he has that Image series, which I think is really good.
I don't know. That's something I've noticed about creators. If they're doing independent work and they've also got a gig with Marvel or DC, it seems like Marvel and DC get they get preference on their time, and so some of their independent work kind of sometimes comes out less frequently.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but they have the money to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't blame them at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's a shame. Oh, hey, speaking of indefinite hiatus and never going to be finished, and why do I do this to myself? I've gotten back onto Berserk a little bit, and I'm still slowly working my way through the backlog of that. And I'm sure anyone who's listening to this is familiar with Berserk and why it's great and why it's hard to like it. But I realized it as I was reading the most recent volume that I picked up. It does something that I really like to see in fiction done well, but is really difficult, especially for modern authors, to figure out, and that is nihilism to the point of comical absurdity, but still written well enough to be compelling. Because the world of Berserk, frankly, it sucks, but it sucks because not just because every human in it is terrible, but also because they're always making deals with the God Hand, which are the 5 Satans who serve Super Satan, more or less, and it's. Actually, I guess not even Super Satan, because and this isn't really so much a spoiler because it's an underlying theme of the series, but there's one god in Berserk and there's not really a devil because there doesn't need to be, because the god of the Berserk world is the one causing the God Hand to show up and the apostles to show up and the demons and everything, and it's just such a ridiculously dark and messed up world. It's kind of hard to not feel engrossed in it. And it's always a shame whenever I see, what if God was evil? Oh, done in other comics and books and such, and it just doesn't really almost lame. I hate to use that word, but that's kind of the only way I can think of it. It's lame.
That's
pretty spot on.
I was going to say, yeah. It's interesting that have you ever read Earth 2 with, why can I not think of the author's name on that one? Where he takes in, you come in with an alternate Earth where the Justice League is now evil.
Right.
God has been thrown down to heaven because the devil won the war. People's hearts are now on the left side. It's complete opposite on everything. That's a fun book to read sometime. Where in their universe, where in our universe, the reason why good triumphs because it's supposed to.
Right.
But if you go to a different universe where all of the things are switched backwards, good is no longer supposed to triumph.
Right.
Evil triumphs. And so it's interesting watching Batman figure out, I can't win here.
Right.
No matter who I beat up or punch out, evil's always going to keep coming up.
Right.
And stronger than it was before. That one's a good philosophical book.
Right. And Obsidian Entertainment's most recent game, Tyranny, is about that. It's where there was a war between the forces of good and the forces of evil, and not just two kingdoms, say, that are good and evil, like God and the devil had a big old punch-up with their armies and everything, and the devil won, and you're the devil's, you're one of his enforcers, more or less. And so it's kind of neat to see the kind of generic fantasy setting, but still well written, because Obsidian does that, done from the perspective of you can be a better person than your coworkers, but your job ultimately is still to be the right hand of this tyrannical dictator and make people's lives miserable because you're evil.
Pretty cool.
You enforce the law, but it's not law that you necessarily would like to. Well, I mean, your character might, but you as a player might not want to enforce these laws. But it doesn't matter. Your boss is the devil, and he won. So do your job. It's kind of neat.
That is kind of neat. I need to check that one out. It's very cool.
What console is that on?
That is on PC and nothing else, because I believe they use the same engine as they did from Pillars of Eternity on that. It is an old, AD&D style game.
Right.
So putting that on console would probably be a bit messy, to say the least. And right now they're working on Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and it'll probably be real snazzy. There's my yearly Obsidian Entertainment shill.
Three other titles I'm reading I just like to mention is Royal City, Jeff Lemire's, and Grass Kings by Matt Kent, and Motor Girl, Terry Moore.
Those three outstanding titles.
Those three authors, Kent, Lemire, and Moore, just I'll read anything they write. I mean, they could write the phone book, and I'll read it. So it's like,
And as much as each individually, especially Kent and Lemire, seem to come out with, I mean, they can fill phone books.
yeah, I know. I don't see how they can be as prolific as they do and still produce extremely high quality stuff.
Now that you mention this, it occurs to me that you made your, I guess, introductory Holy Balls comment
yes.
right around the time that we published an interview with both Matt Kent and
Yes.
Jeff Lemire, one right after the other.
I know.
And we didn't plan it that way. That's just the way that it happened. But they go really well together, and they work together.
Oh yeah, they're good friends.
Yeah.
They work together. I know co-wrote The Valiant, which was the title for Valiant, and yeah, they I follow them both on Twitter, and they you can see that they make little digs at each other. On Twitter.
One of the funniest parts of our interview with Jeff Lemire is at one point, I don't know if it was me or it was Andy, I think it was Andy, who made the comment during the Lemire interview. It's like, well, just the other day we were talking with Matt Kent, and then Jeff Lemire said, God, I'm sorry. And we got a kick out of that, knowing how good friends they are. But yeah, I mean, both of them are prolific. Both of them do great things, and both of them also have similar backgrounds in that they got started in the self-published / indie field,
right?
And then eventually gain recognition in the mainstream, and so now they do work for mainstream or more mainstream publishers and the independent stuff as well.
Right. Yeah, I follow everything they do.
Yeah.
And Terry Moore is just a legend.
Yeah, I really like Motor Girl. And every series that Terry Moore does, I wonder, when I hear a new series of his is about to come out, it's like, well, how will that distinguish itself in light of the other things he's done? So, for instance, after Strangers in Paradise, and I first started to see references to Echo, it's like, this is not going to be a Strangers in Paradise. But then I loved Echo. But then after Echo, then there were ruminations of what eventually became Rachel Rising. It's like, it's not Echo or Strangers in Paradise. But it was incredible, And then after Rachel Rising, which, Rachel Rising, I mean, as much as I like Echo and especially Strangers in Paradise, Rachel Rising was a high point for him, I think. I mean, I don't want to say it's his best, but it's right up there of his self-created stuff in my book. But then after that, it's like, okay, Motor Girl, what's that going to be? Is that going to be a letdown? But I haven't been let down by it.
No,
I mean, it's quite a bit lighter than Rachel Rising, but it also has a quite serious side because we don't know if the protagonist is off, a war veteran, or not.
Yeah, and it also has those aliens in there who are have a very cartoon strip type of the way they look and act. It's a weird juxtaposition. You have this, a lot of this serious background about her past and her at time over in the Army or in the Marines, and then this sort of silliness of these on the surface silliness of these aliens. It's an interesting way he's laying out that book, but I think it's one of his best works as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And he's a nice guy.
Yeah. And I think it was you interviewed him briefly at Fan Expo.
Yes, back in late April, early May.
And I believe he said he's going to do another smaller Strangers in Paradise series next.
Yeah, he had mentioned that. So
I'm looking forward to that.
That's good. Yeah, he's another creator I really like. So what about the rest of you? I mean, what are you reading now?
I actually don't have a lot of time to read because in my free time I'm actually making a webcomic.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. That's fun.
Promote away.
So what is the webcomic?
Haven't done much yet, but it's called Stolen Memories, and it's just a cute sort of kids comic about a transgender witch who has to save her village because someone came in and messed up everybody's memories of everything.
That sounds cool.
So she has to go out and into the big world and find all the memory orb things to save everyone.
Are you writing and drawing it, or?
Yeah, it's going really slowly because, shoot, I have a job and things to pay for.
Jobs, they ruin everything.
I know. But it's a Flash comic hosted on Comic Fury.
All right.
I need to work on the HTML.
Okay, so
you can't watch it unless you're using Windows or anything.
So to find the comic, we would go where online?
Stolen Memories. You know what? I should know my own URL. I have 13 followers, so I'm like, okay, whatever. Let me look. Because the website can change the URL depending on
Is it Comic Fury or Comic?
Fury as in anger, not furry as in
Comic
furry. Yes.
So Comic Fury is what? The
It's
community
an
that's
online web hosting site that's free. It has a super customizable domain for your comic if you do one. So you can edit the HTML and make it all fancy. Okay, so it's just thecomic series.com. So
everyone go check that out.
Oh,
Yes.
that would be cool. So, I read webcomics, obviously. Most of them aren't that good. Ava's Demon. Well, you know, webcomics don't have quality control. Anyone with a pencil and paper and an idea can make a webcomic, which is good and bad. Like, if you're just wanting to kill time, you can click on anything and, like, oh, there's a free little comic. But then there's no quality control because, you know, Image, you have to submit an idea to people who look over it and say yes or no and stuff like that. So, but Ava's Demon is really good. It's by a former worker from DreamWorks. It's a former artist from there. And it's about a girl. It's like sort of science fantasy. This young girl has a demon haunting her that used to be a warlord before their planet got destroyed by this ultra religion. It's really weird, but it's really pretty, and I'd check it out. It's my favorite one.
I've looked at Ava's Demon, but I haven't read it. And the reason I've looked at it is because several people have done what you did, and that is recommended as a title to check out. But that's been going on for quite a while, right?
It has.
So that's one of those that takes some commitment to sit down and catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's always one of the most...
It's also like one panel a page sort of thing. So it reads more like a storyboard, which is like the same thing I'm doing with mine. So obviously that's why I'm drawn to it. So it says it has like... over 700 or whatever it's on now. But you have to realize those are like one panel pages a thing. So it goes quicker than what it says on the site.
I was going to say, that's always one of the most fun parts of finding a new webcomic that you haven't heard of, or maybe you've heard of it before, you're only checking it out for the first time, is going back through the years, and in some cases, decade-long backlog. Like, I recently, I've heard about it before, but I recently only decided to check out Ménage à Trois, which is not good. It's really not good, but I decided to go through it.
You call it Ménage à Trois? I thought it's Ménage à Three.
Trois means three.
Right, yeah, I know. I know enough French. But I think that by those who are big fans, they call it Ménage à Three.
You're probably right. I wouldn't know. I don't count myself as a big fan of it, but I went through the backlog when I found it, and by the time that I realized this is not really for me, I was on about the 5th year of the backlog, because it's so easy, especially if you're on a computer. You just click, read, click, and it goes by a lot quicker. And I imagine with a single panel. Also,
unless that single panel comic is Homestuck, that takes way too long, and I went way into it without realizing I skipped like having to click a dialogue button to read what everyone was saying. So I was like halfway in, and I was like, I don't get anything that's happening, and apparently I missed like 70% of the comic by not reading the comic below it.
It's an easy way to get through it fast.
Well, I mean, that can be a problem for well-established webcomics that have been around for a long time and have an established audience, in that, I mean, okay, the good side of that is that you have an established audience that becomes a community, and so people get references, and they understand how to read it and how to approach certain characters and past scenarios, histories, and whatnot. But that could be a potential wall for people coming into the comic for the first time, because then things are written, or can be written, in such a way that they seem a little more inclusive. And if you're not part of the community that already knows what's going on, you may have a more difficult time than usual jumping on board. When I read Ménage à Three, and if our listeners out there want to correct me, maybe I'm mispronouncing, but no, we reviewed that on the webcomic show a few months ago. And one of the things that my co-host for that show, Sean, and I both commented on was the fact that there seemed to be something a little exclusive about the relationship of the characters, and I found it a little more difficult to get into, not in terms of not being able to understand what was going on. I was able to do that, but just feeling a part of things, not having started with the comic in the earlier days. Another thing, though, that I may have liked it a little better than you, but it's not my favorite. But one of the things that kind of put me off a bit is it did have a kind of gag strip feel to it, and I have nothing against gag strips, whether they be in print or on online or webcomics, but that's just not the kind of story that I gravitate toward. And sometimes, even in terms of long-form narrative, the kind of gag each strip format can work. Sometimes, though, it doesn't, and I don't know. I had mixed feelings about Menage
I've seen
3.
a lot of webcomic artists, since they update like a few, like a page a week or however much, they want people to come back, so they try to make the pages more gag a day. So you have like that bite size when you come back. I feel that people forget, though, that some people will just go through the whole archive or whatever and read it like a book, and then they're like gag a day, everything ends on a cliffhanger or whatever. This reads really choppy.
That's right.
Go through it.
That's another experience I had in reading Menage 3. I felt that it became repetitive. In other words, it became overtly formulaic to me. And for the reasons that you mentioned, I can see why webcomic creators do the installments in the ways that they do. You know, if you do have a kind of gag or gag-ish format where there is a payoff every day, maybe in the fourth or the third panel, that does provide, you know, a little sustenance for that one. And if someone didn't come back, you know, the next week or the next day or however often it's offered, at least they've gotten something out of that one strip, which could stand alone. But if you read them all at once with an expectation of a coherent narrative, and I think with even gag-like stories like Menage 3, I think that's a legitimate expectation because there are chapters and storylines. But when those storylines or chapters are broken up into individual installments that seem to have the same kind of rhythm over and over and over again, I got bored.
Yeah, I think I kind of fell under the same spell when I was trying to read the first few chapters. I was, you know, that fourth panel gag it kind of gets annoying a little bit. So
questionable content ran into the same troubles that Menage a Trois or 3 did, or Trey or whatever, where they use the same jokes every single week, and you know they'll cycle through their bag of jokes with 10 or so strips, reset the clock, and the only way that they have to introduce more spice to the story is adding more characters. And when you have these comics like Questionable Content or Menage a Trois or I don't know about Homestuck, I haven't read it, but when you just keep adding characters and your story keeps going on for years at a time, you eventually wind up with this just unwieldy cast that you want to bring back characters because, you know, it's fun to see characters you haven't seen in a while, but when it's one of the faces we're supposed to remember out of a cast of hundreds, it's kind of a mess. Yeah. Wow.
So the moral of the story may be to choose webcomics that haven't been around for that long.
Yes, that's right.
And if you need good recommendations, you do have the webcomics episodes.
That's right, the Comics Alternative.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to blow my own horn, but you did it, so thank you.
I was going to do that for you.
Or pick ones that don't update very much, like Dingy Cats. It's good, it's just 4 new ones in 2010. Yeah.
Yay!
Wow, that's a lot of dedication right there.
Wow.
And that happens. I mean, I try not to hold it against webcomic creators when they don't update as frequently as they announce that they do. You know, because there's some, you go to their site and on their homepage they say updated every Tuesday or Thursday, and you realize when you go back through the archive, maybe it's 2 or 3 times a month. You know, life happens, as they say, right?
Sure.
So these things happen. If that's the case, though, go back and change your homepage.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
Update your
Like
site.
you said, you got to have a job, you got to pay bills, you got to. And then but greatly change your homepage saying, okay, not every 2 days.
Updates whenever.
Yeah,
Be honest
exactly.
In fact, I was just talking with one of my students in one of the summer classes that I'm teaching before I came here. And one of the things I'm doing in one class of mine, all my students have to maintain a blog for the 5-week session. And instead of asking them, because it's about digital content and design, and instead of just saying, okay, pick any topic whatsoever you want and then blog on that, this time around I thought I would restrict what topic they could write on in some way. And so I told them that in some form or another they had to work webcomics into their blog. So if they wanted to, they could just do a straight-out review blog, right, where, twice a week or once a week or however they choose to do so for the 5-week session, they look at a webcomic and discuss it critically. And so that would be a way of doing it. Or if they wanted to, they could choose a particular theme or topic. So, for instance, issues of gender representation, right? Or gender identity. And to do so and write about it on the blog, not just gender identification in general, but as it is represented or played out in webcomics that they found. So anyway, they have to utilize centrally webcomics in some form or another. So I was talking with some student today about a blog that she is doing for class, and she decided to devote her class blog to one author, Mina Sundberg. And Mina Sundberg, she's currently doing a really, really good webcomic called Stand Still, Stay Silent. But she previously did one, I haven't read it, it's like Red Tail, I think the name Red Tail is in the title somewhere. And I apologize to anyone who knows this that I can't remember the exact title. But I mention that because we were talking in class today about kind of a sideway. It wasn't a general conversation, but we got off on a tangent. And we were talking about ways that certain webcomic creators market themselves and then merchandise their material. Because Sundberg does what a lot of people do, and that is publishes a webcomic for a while, and either after completing it or getting to a particular endpoint, like in a chapter, then they'll put out a hardbound edition, often through services like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, in order for them to afford that. And if they have a large enough and loyal enough fan base, then they have a relatively easy going in terms of getting the funding to put out a hard copy of the webcomic. And I think that that's a strategy that a lot of creators have taken now.
The rise of websites, like you said, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or ongoing services like Patreon has... obviously they have their issues, but I am glad they exist because they have opened up the creative, as the internet has done in general, but they specifically have opened up the creative fields to a lot of people who otherwise couldn't get into them. They just wouldn't have the means to do it because, I can't focus on updating this webcomic 17 times a day. I have a job that I have to, live, or I need to live. So, yeah. It's been kind of cool to see stuff like that happen. And obviously with Kickstarter and Indiegogo especially, you do sometimes get the misfires. Mm-hmm. You get stuff like this is a webcomic, but you get like the Yogscast game that they tried to make and then botched terribly and kind of took money from their fans over. You get it was Cloud9, I think. It was a webcomic that was fully crowdfunded and then some. Got 9 pages in, and then the creator just quit and turned aggressive when questioned about it. But still, those are the exceptions rather than the rule, and it has been really cool to see new avenues and new genres of stuff that we wouldn't normally have gotten come out of the abyss, I guess, where there was nothing before crowdfunding. It's kind of
right. Yeah, and with a service like Patreon, where people can, there's no end product, right? It's something that's always ongoing for as long as they choose to do it. Then they can have a steady income. It may not be much of an income. I mean, it could be something, even $10 a month. but that's $10 a month that they wouldn't be getting if they didn't have a Patreon campaign.
If nothing else, puts them less in the red.
Right.
Yes. You're over here.
So thank God for Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and those kind of services.
Such as the Comics Alternative Patreon.
That's right. And see, this is yet another example of one of you guys allowing me not to blow my horn. Yes, the Comics Alternative does have a Patreon account. And if you go to patreon.com/comicsalternative, you'll find out more detail. And a lot of podcasters use Patreon as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes.
If y'all don't mind, I do have a question for Kelly, and this is part of the webcomics discussion as we turn into the webcomics cast again.
Sorry, I converted the podcast into
awesome.
the other
We
one.
wouldn't have thought to bring him up. It's awesome.
No.
But
okay.
this is kind of something that I've noticed certain creators feel like in different fields where they have a kind of inferiority complex to other similar mediums, like video games have kind of an inferiority complex with movies. It's not massive, but you see stuff about how publishers want this to be cinematic and they hamper their games because of that. I've seen a bit of that with webcomics to print comics. Is that common, do you think?
That they feel like they should be getting more than webcomics? Or sorry, I don't quite understand.
No, I should rephrase
Are you trying to
that.
say like it's more like where webcomics are trying to look more like print comics?
They kind of feel the need to ape stuff they see in print comics to get popularity and stuff.
Really depends on the creator. I personally thought it would be cool to have a Flash comic with little bits of animation and sound and stuff, because I am hosting it on the web, and that is something the web can do. I couldn't print it out and it'd be the same.
Right.
So I thought, shoot, that sounds fun, and
All right.
I've seen some people really try to emulate like a Marvel style. It just really depends on the webcomic creator. It's such a big ocean of stuff out there. A lot of people do want to print eventually, but I find they don't plan ahead, so they all have like wonky pages, and it's too much work for them. I do have a friend that plans to print, and they did a ton of research, and they put their comic on hold so they can properly put the appropriate pages per issue, but I don't see many others do that. A lot of times this is a fun hobby that, it gets money now? That's cool, if it gets to that point.
Right. And you've read some webcomics that were internet-based only, right? That were interactive, that couldn't
or
be
that were
made into
specific
print?
to the medium to where it wouldn't be the same in print. Yeah, and in the vast majority of the webcomics that are available are webcomics that, for all practical purposes, could be printed and you would lose nothing. It wouldn't change. So basically you take the page that's been uploaded or created online, and if you print it, it's the exact same thing. So the vast majority of those. But then there are other webcomics that are, I guess, unique in that they use the technology and the potential of the World Wide Web in ways that could not be done in print. So one example is through things like animation. And not just flash animation, but even some minor kind of animation. In fact, we, in our last webcomics episode, Sean and I looked at a short completed webcomic called The Lives of the Women of Gitmo. And basically it was 2 stories in a relatively short webcomic that about 2 women who were in the Navy during the early days of post 9/11, right, when the prisoners were just starting to come to Guantanamo Bay. I mention that because in both stories, quick memoirs of those 2 women, there's one panel where there is some animation, and it's not significant animation. And I'm not exactly sure why the creators chose those particular panels that little bit of animation. But it's there. But anyway, it's animation nonetheless. But another way that creators can utilize the web in ways that you cannot in print is through ways that it's what Scott Cloud had discussed when he talked about the infinite canvas, right? So if we think of the computer screen as analogous to a window, and so we see whatever's on the other side of that screen, so to speak, the other side of the window. So the screen becomes a window. The way that we see a story unfold from panel to panel, it doesn't have to go one page, the next page, the next page. It doesn't have to move linearly, right, going from left to right. It can go up. It can go down. We can really zero in, going, I guess, further into the distance of the screen, so to speak, or pulling out. I mean, there's one webcomic that Scott McCloud does called The Right Number, where the panels basically come at you, so to speak. And that's how you page through, is you read one panel, and then you click through, and the next panel it's almost like it's in miniature embedded in that panel. So as the panel you just read comes to the fore, then the panel, so to speak, behind it becomes the next page. Or some of the things that, let's say, Emily Carroll does on her website. And I think she's quite clever in how she tells stories that sometimes are what I would call standard webcomics, page, static page, and that's it. Sometimes she mixes in animation. Sometimes she makes it interactive, where you're given a front page, and then depending on where you click, that's what the story will become for that moment. So the story experience could be different depending on who clicks where. So those are the kind of things that I really enjoy, how people can utilize the technology of the web to make it something very different than a print comic is.
Right. He can use it and he wants to use it, definitely. That or you have
I like those. I like playing around and experimenting with the potential.
It sounds interesting because webcomics is not something I've been much interested in. I didn't get much interested in the just panel to panel, but what you're describing sounds intriguing. And I may go back and re-examine some of that.
Yeah, in fact, if you go to Scott McCloud's website, he has a lot of his early web comics where he was experimenting around with the technology. Really doesn't do much of that anymore, but in the early days, this is around the time that he was writing Reinventing Comics, which was the follow-up to Understanding Comics. And he was talking in that book about the potential for the web and how that could really shake things up. Now, it really hasn't shaken things up because, again, the vast majority of the web comics out there are just online versions of things that could be in static print form. But then not all of that stuff in terms of the web comics are that way. He plays around and experiments around. Others do as well. Like I mentioned, Emily Carroll, another one who you should check out and just see what she does.
That brings up that whole argument about stuff that's online. Even with digital versions of comics that are in print, in discussing with a lot of my friends, we go back and forth on all kinds of arguments. I've got one guy; he reads everything off of his iPad, mm-hmm. and other people are like, "No, just don't. If it's not in print, I don't want to read it." I enjoy see how it plays out because you keep thinking, okay, digital comics are going to get more of a presence, and they seem to be, but they don't seem to be. I don't see them supplanting print comics anytime soon.
Right. Well, even what you mentioned kind of brings up yet another topic, and this is something that I think longtime listeners of the Comics Alternative probably get tired of me, making this point. Digital comics and web comics are not necessarily the same thing.
No, I understand
right.
that.
Yeah, that all web comics are digital comics, but not all digital comics are web comics. So when someone says, I like to read my stuff in print, I would guess what they're referring to or reacting to is what publishers like DC, Marvel, but then others as well do when they put out digital format of their hard copy comics, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's digital first and then they put out a hard copy later. Those are things that do not necessarily need the World Wide Web in order for you to view it. In other words, you can read it some other way outside of a web browser. Web comics, you need a web browser in order to see that.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, so are they referring to webcomics as something that they don't want because they like print?
No, they're more referring to the digital versions of the same comics that you get on Comixology or Image does their own digital versions. That's kind of what I think a lot of people are having trouble with. Or, I don't know if it's a generational thing. Some people that are older, like myself, I'm in my 50s now, and so it's like, I've never knew much other than print comics. And you get these digital formats that you can read with the guided views, and for me, there's a lot to speak for them, but there's things that I don't like about them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a print guy as well. I would much prefer the print. But let's say, for instance, if you are limited in terms of storage space, and you don't have any room anymore, then digital becomes an alternative.
Right.
I know there are.
Yeah, the other thing, I just got doing from a lot of traveling, and obviously I love the print stuff, but it's hard to carry this in my suitcase.
Well, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
It's like I never travel.
So the digital stuff was a lot easier to take that around and read. And
I think
carrying all my comic books with me.
One of the things I've noticed, though, is that I don't think artists draw with the digital or the guided view in mind. So when they're laying out their pages, they're doing it for print, and so some of those don't translate very well.
I do agree with that.
When you're looking at them on digital, especially in the guided view, unless you've got reading them on a large monitor or
because I was noticing that too. Is like there'll be a huge like a 2-page spread of something, and you can't really either you can't see it because it's so zoomed down, or when you try to zoom it back up again, then you're not getting the full effect of what he was trying to do. And hopefully someday they'll figure out a way of doing that, but so far they haven't.
Make a shape-shifting phone.
That could be it.
For splash pages, it turns into a tablet, then you swipe and it just shrinks.
That would be amazing.
But I know digital comics, mostly like Comixology, are more popular with certain demographics, usually ones that aren't known to frequent physical comic book stores, such as Valhalla Comics and Games. Children, especially, I know, and mostly children. But I know they're a lot more popular like that because they're just more convenient.
Yeah.
Not necessarily people who don't want to get the print copies, but either don't want to wait for Amazon to send it to them, or they maybe don't want to go out of their way to find a place like this, or they just can't get to it.
Right.
And also there's the convenience of being able to download something on your mobile device without having to go anywhere.
Yep.
It's cheaper too sometimes to count like travel or shipping.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
To just get a digital copy of whatever.
Well, and then another argument against digital that some people have come up is, especially on Comixology, if you get DC and Marvel, what you're getting is not DRM free, so you can't really download it.
True.
And a lot of people balk against it. They're saying, I'm not really buying anything. Right. I'm buying the right to read this online, but
It's like you're renting it.
Yeah. I'm not actually getting a physical copy, and that bothers some people.
Yeah. This is they have to reconfigure their understanding of ownership, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think they're afraid, what if Comixology goes away? And I'm like, well, that's not likely. Somebody would take it over, but
I guess, isn't Comixology owned by Amazon now?
Yes.
Yeah, they're not going away.
But I mean, I can understand what they're saying. Is like, if I don't own this, then I can't download it.
Yeah.
But even then, all they have to do is it's Amazon. They have bottomless money. They'll just throw engineers at it until it goes back up. And then,
It's true.
Unless, the grid goes down and the world gets plunged back into the dark ages. In which case,
There is that.
Yeah, print's better in the dark ages.
You can carry your comics around with you in the terrible world that will come in the future.
In the Why the Last Man of our future, where there are still men, but comics are the water. I guess.
The new paper money.
Yeah.
We read a lot of. My co-hosts and I on the Comics Alternative, the various shows, definitely the weekly review show, but also on some of the other series as well. We read a lot of comics in digital format, but it's out of necessity because that's either all we can get from the publisher or it's the quickest thing we can get from a publisher, which I don't have a problem with most of the time. There are occasions, though, when the digital version, usually it's PDF, that they send is of lower resolution quality, and so the colors just don't look the same, or the files, each page loads, at least on my device, in kind of a slow and awkward way. And when they have, quote-unquote, designed the digital PDF version, they don't keep in mind that every now and again there are things such as two-page spreads that seeing the two pages together is significant, and so they don't account for that.
Yeah.
And there have even been things that we've missed by reading things digitally that we would have gotten or have appreciated more if they were in hard copy. But again, we're getting a free version with the PDF, so I'm not complaining. Although I guess I am now. But.
Were you, I guess, talking about your monthly solicitations for like the
preview show?
Yeah, the preview show. How sometimes that you guys will be scrolling through and
Well, in an ideal world, I would get my copy of previews, because I get my comics through our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service, and I do not get a discount for doing that. They discount everyone. Although Discount Comic Book Service is not sponsoring this episode because we're at Valhalla Games and Comics at 3100 Independence Parkway in Plano, Texas. But anyway, so if I don't get my copy of previews in time, then I have to go for a backup and digital. And Andy, maybe about a year ago, not quite a year ago, I can't remember, he found that there is some Australian retailer that has available every month a PDF of previews. And I mean, I would think that they probably shouldn't be putting it up for people to download, but I'm not complaining because I get the digital copy every month, and that's how we make sure that we get a copy of previews, because we can read it. And it does have a watermark on it. I just take the watermark off in order to read it. So, but yeah, it does make things a little more difficult to scroll through, and every now and again we'll complain that, okay, it's taking a while because we're looking at a PDF.
Oh, okay.
But usually it's not because of the quality of the file. Usually it's because the previews every month is so damn huge, and so to go from one page to another, or one section to another, can take a while. Also, the PDF page number is not the same thing as the page number in the hard copy catalog. So if I say, okay, I next go to page 71, and Andy thinks I mean 71 of the PDF, he may not be at the same place that I am. I mean, that rarely happens, but it's a possibility.
In terms of physical versus digital, I can't believe I haven't thought about it until now, but I guess it's because the shelf for it is right behind me. But not just, Western comics, but Japanese stuff tends to be tends to be black and white and gray, I guess, but no real color on the majority of the pages, and it's more just high contrast, heavy shading in a lot of areas. And I remember hearing for a while that Kindles were actually pretty good at displaying that because of that digital ink that they have. Because it's just gray and black and white, it's a lot better at showing off the contrast. But I'm guessing a regular Western comic wouldn't look as good on something like that.
Yeah, computers, there's actually two modes for color. The RGB for like web devices, and the CMYK for print. And there's some sort of difference that if you have your color set wrong, it's going to print out really weird or look strange on the computer. So they might, I don't know, I would hope they would think of that when displaying it, but I'm thinking, because that's another thing, if you wanted to print your own comic and you drew it all digitally, if you had it all set to RGB the whole time, you might print it out and everything looks weird because your computer wasn't the appropriate color for the printer or whatever. Like your blues can be purple. Your so it's like, oh no. So there could be a I guess disconnect.
Yeah,
there.
printing errors happen from time to time, and most of the time in the comic book issue world, those are of higher value just because they're not as consistent. So, I mean, as far as manga, I don't know if that's the actual thing. So.
Well, you guys are mentioning manga and digital. I think that's one of the reasons why. I don't know that I don't have the statistics to back this up at all, but I would guess that consumption of manga is proportionately higher through digital platforms than Western comics, and maybe because of, or at least partly because of this issue of black and white versus color.
It might be availability too.
And
Yep. So I was about to say, here in the States, there's a lot of stuff that you just flat out don't get a hold of because it never gets brought over. So you read fan translated stuff.
Well, yeah,
the
probably not
scanlation,
until
yeah.
years later and rights issues or whatever.
Or if you're trying to read One Piece and you can't find issue 21 anywhere, you might as well just find it online because
That's 21 of how many?
a million.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the issue or the actual volume number of One Piece is at right now.
I'm not sure what it's at.
Probably 50 something.
I like One Piece, but dang, there is so much.
I remember reading an interview with him one time. Kind of a cool thing. That I liked One Piece when I was a child, and then at some point I stopped, and now I can't go back because there's too much to go, like the backlog to go through. But I have a lot of respect for the author because, unlike, say, the author of Berserk, Kentaro Miura, I don't know why I pulled him out of the hat. He has the entire story ready to go, written out and just done in his, well, probably not just in his head, but he's got these storyboards or planning or major beats for everything that's going to happen in One Piece. And he did that because this is a story that he's been working on since he was like 12, I think. And if I recall right, he projected that it would end somewhere around 2026. And he so far, I don't know if he's gone on like hiatus at any point. It doesn't seem like it because sales of One Piece are keeping like half the Japanese economy afloat. It's nuts. But I have the same respect for him that I have for Andrew Hussey, the guy who did Homestuck, which I believe actually finished like last year.
Finished a while ago.
The level of output that these two have is nuts. Like Andrew Hussey put out something like an average of like six pages a day, usually interactable, and kept the entire chronology and continuity of the story going the whole time. And for a comic that someone once described to me as what if, basically, in terms of how much there is, it's like if every piece of Star Wars fan fiction was declared canon one day and just shoved into the continuity somehow. It's roughly that, and it's, even if you don't like it, you have to marvel at how impressive it is, the work ethic that he has.
It's very true.
Kind of reminds me of something my grandfather said about two authors who I know one of them has dabbled in comics a bit, the other not so much. Cormac McCarthy and Stephen King, who don't. Well, Stephen King does put out a lot, but they both put out just such incredible stuff every time they publish something. And he said of them, they probably throw away better stuff than 90% of the authors who get published. It's hard to imagine that's true.
Yeah, I believe that. Especially with Stephen King, he just writes. He's like, other people live life, I just write about it.
He just adds in like a
few demons,
possessed car and a demonic
He said he needs to
dog.
make it interesting. So.
Yeah. He's a witch.
Well, we've covered on this on location episode quite a large area. Starting off with comics that have just come out, graphic novels. Surprisingly, we really haven't talked about San Diego at all, and that begins tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned it,
Yeah.
that you're not there. But we
You're
talked
at San
about
Diego,
webcomics. We
please
talked
send
a
me
lot
stuff.
about
Yeah.
webcomics.
All the comic
Manga.
variants, please.
Yes.
Please and thank you.
The toys. If you just happen to get the trailer for the Infinity Gauntlet, you can send that too. I won't turn you in, I promise.
Send yourself information. Say hi to John Sweet?
Yeah.
Say hi to him for me. He's there.
Well, I was trying to segue out of this recording. I shouldn't have mentioned San Diego because that got you guys off then. Off on the San Diego tangent. But anyway, I mean, the bottom line was that we've covered a lot of territory, so that's
Yeah,
good. I mean,
it is
it
great.
was an open topic, and whatever happened kind of episode. So I want to thank every single one of you for being a part of this, which will be the last Valhalla on location show for a while now, and I will miss you guys. Yes.
I haven't asked. Are y'all going to keep just the regular episodes of the podcast going while you're gone, or?
Oh yeah. Oh no. We'll still do the show. It's just the only thing that will change is I can't do this as an on location show because I won't be here.
Set up a laptop in Skype with your face there. You can just stare out.
You could. It would kind of bend our understanding of what on location means. You may be on location. I won't be.
On location via Skype.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be at some location. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
just
a good
staring
point.
at the
So
wall,
arguably
guys?
every single one of our episodes are on location.
Yeah.
That's right.
You could just
Well,
record
here's-
diatribes
On
about
location.
stuff.
Here's hoping you'll find a new comic book store to do another on.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Spread the influence.
Yeah, that's
North
right.
Carolina.
Yeah, and there may be occasions where I do suggest, hey guys, if someone can get a computer there that we can talk on Skype, then maybe I can touch base, and it could be like a pseudo on location show.
There you go. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. If anybody has a working computer.
Yeah,
I do have one.
but I do want to thank all of you for being a part of not only this particular on location episode, but the on location episodes that you've come to in the past, and even if we've had just one or two people who take part in it, that's something. So I appreciate that. I've really enjoyed this. And again, I want to thank the people at Valhalla Games and Comics in Plano, Texas, for letting us come in here every month and do what we're doing and compete with the gamers who are behind us, who actually, I think they're making at least as much sound as we have been in terms of our comics commentary.
They're very excitable.
Yes, they are. Valhalla Games and Comics in Plano, Texas, located at 3100 Independence Parkway. Great guys. They know their stuff. They will help you find what you're looking for. That's Valhalla Games and Comics. And if you want to find out more about this podcast, on location and episode, then get in touch with us. We absolutely love to hear from you. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. And if you want to be really old-fashioned, do it through a dial phone.
Wait, can you do it actually through a dial phone?
I guess one could if they're out there. Or you can reach us something a little more newfangled, and that is via email. I'm getting mixed up. We're two guys at comicsalternative.com, or you can email me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com, and you can find us all over social media. I mean, we are all over the place. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to this podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com. So yeah, get in touch with us and let us know what you think about these on-location shows and our other episodes as well. Thank you very much, guys. I've had a great time, and have a wonderful rest of the summer.
Oh, thank you for having us. Yeah.
You too, Derek.
I love all you guys.
And